Gay. What do you think about, or how does this word make you feel? As much as we love to joke around with this word, it's a movement that really carries real world gravity. And beneath the situation veiled by jokes and sarcasm, we'll be truly exploring gay today. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the YGS podcast. And I am your host, James Lee, with my co host, Dominic. Today, we'll be once again responding to your suggestions. You, the viewers, put in our comment section for the last podcast.
So it looks like the most liked comment from last week's podcast about period cramps is by Pav Krej GM asking, what are your guys' thoughts on the recent rise in homosexuality in China? And more specifically, how do you think social media has played a role in this development?
Oh, that's actually a pretty interesting question, Pav. Do you have anything to say about this?
Honestly, I think firstly it is very clear that there has definitely been a rise in the presence that the homosexual community has had in China, with queer media becoming far more popular in recent years. I mean, there's also like the fact that there are just way more LGBTQI plus related communities and activities present in China, such as Shanghai Pride or Pink Dot Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's pretty true. I think it's pretty clear that there is a greater level of homosexuals present in today's society than before. But to go back to the question of how it's related to social media, this is going to be a harder question to answer. So, to more accurately give the viewers insight into this question, we have brought on 3 experts relating to this topic. Everyone, please give a warm and generous welcome to Jeremy, Yue Wu, and lastly, Leo. Good to meet you all. And so, as people with more knowledge in this field than us, would you like to introduce yourselves and perhaps give some insight into this issue?
Good morning, YGS viewers. My name is Jeremy. I'm currently undergoing a study in HKU regarding this exact same subject. A couple of weeks ago, me and my team sent out a survey asking Chinese men their thoughts on the current social status and respect homosexuals receive in the Chinese climate, as well as their usage of social media to better connect themselves to other homosexual communities.
I see. That sounds interesting. So, was there anything of note that you could mention from the results presented by these resources?
Of course, the main finding I want to discuss came from 2 particular questions. First, whether the recipients are a part of any online LGBTQ communities, and if they believe it played a part in their own well-being and comfort, on top of how they believe Chinese values may have changed due to social media, with regards of sexual identity.
So what did they say?
Well, over 65% of recipients said that they had joined these communities, and out of those 65%, almost 70% of them agreed that being in these communities allowed them to be more confident in themselves, as well as a better understanding of their own sexuality. As for how Chinese traditional values have changed as a result of the rising homosexual community in China, I find it very interesting that many people discussed how they have found a way for their sexual identity as a homosexual man to coexist alongside Chinese beliefs and values.
Really? From what I know, passing on children for the next generation is a rather important part of Chinese culture. So how does that coexist with being homosexual?
Well, not all Chinese values can coexist alongside certain sexual identities, much like the one you just pointed out. But other very traditional values, such as filial piety, education, or courtesy, are values that are very non-specific to one gender or another, and thus can very easily be meshed with one another. So, to think about your original question, James, I think this effect of social media has had on homosexuals in China is very prominent, in the sense that not only has it allowed for members of the LGBTQ community in China to feel more secure in their own identities, but also has allowed for an evolution in Chinese values, creating a more nuanced and modern value system that incorporates those varying sexual identities, even if there may be some social friction that exists.
Okay. That was a very insightful answer. And now moving on, does anyone have any thoughts on Jeremy's findings? So how about we go with Yue Wu? Maybe you would like to give a self-introduction first?
Hi everyone, my name's Yue Wu. from China's Youth University of Political Studies, and I've actually written an article relating to the destigmatizing effects of social media on homosexuality in China.
Ah, all right then. So, what were the findings of the research?
Well, the main thing that I want to talk about is how groups of people with negative prejudice against homosexuality, with gradual exposure to more homosexual ideals and media, eventually we can reduce their prejudice to some extent. This idea is actually it's really well rooted in the field of sociology. It's something called parasocial contact theory. So you use a more subtle and gradual introduction of some ideas into population. This helps actually reduce friction between those peoples and those ideas. Yeah, this kind of also links back into what Jeremy was talking about how it seems that social media's rise has caused an evolution and growth in Chinese values. The existence of social media as a medium, it actually allows for this spread and advertisement of homosexual ideas, which over time helps the general population become just more accepting of this concept instead of being suddenly flooded and being forced to accept it, which would actually be more repulsive for them.
Okay. Well, in that case, before our last guest, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, actually, although not done by me, there are actually two studies written by some of my colleagues that I think would be great to reference. The first one was written by A.D. Zhang. He interviewed a lot of gay Chinese men and the influences that social media had on their lives. So all the participants in that study actually they emphasized that it created for them a sense of belonging. They felt really validated seeing others in the same situation as themselves. And for another one, for the second one, this is actually an in-depth study on the effects of media use on homosexuality in China. It was done by sociologists by Kang Hu, who found that consuming traditional media, like newspaper or news, compared to the more online sources that we're more used to nowadays, like Instagram and such and such. So the newspaper and the more traditional media had a greater inhibitory effect on people becoming more tolerant of homosexuality. The traditional media inhibited people from becoming more tolerant of homosexuality. Overall, the point I'm trying to get at is that social media it inexplicably has a positive effect on the homosexual community, nurturing more tolerance and everything. We have backed up research studies to prove it.
All right, yeah, that's a pretty fair argument. Well, so far, it looks like there is overwhelming support for social media being able to help homosexual people. So, let's see if our final guest has anything to say about this opinion. Everyone, please say hi to Leo. So, Leo, as the last guest of our podcast, do you have any thoughts, or do your thoughts on this question differ from Jeremy and Yue Wu?
Well, although I don't really have any research backed studies to defend my point, what I do have is first-hand experience as a homosexual in China.
In that case, then, maybe from your own personal experience, how do you think social media has impacted your identity as a homosexual man in China?
Well, back when I was a child, my parents told me I was their pride and joy, but as I began to grow up and was exposed to more social media, I felt more pressure to maintain the mask of heterosexuality. I began forcing myself to delete gay apps and just go through the motions of dating, meeting women, having a formulaic dinner, following a script that I didn't make. A key turning point was when horrible nights when I stayed over at a girl's place, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't perform. I feel crushed, and we just spent the rest of the night in silence. That's when I know the difference between straight and gay isn't just about sex. It's the scent you give off, the look in your eyes, the very energy you radiate. But even then, I feel trapped. The constant pressure from the media amplifies heterosexual notions. So, although there's a good that comes from social media for the homosexual community, I believe that it can have an equally detrimental effect as well.
Okay, all right. I see we're finally seeing differing opinions now. So, Leo, do you have anything else to add to your argument?
Yes, actually, although it isn't a personal argument, it is something I wanted to mention. So, Jeremy, I see that your survey also asked the questions on whether the participants believe that social media have been able to remedy any negative reception they've experienced from Chinese society.
Yes, that's correct.
In that case, I wanted to ask, was there anyone talk negatively about the effects of social media?
Actually, yes, Leo. That's a good point that I wanted to get into after what you said about the pressure of social media. As although there isn't anyone who believes that social media has only had a negative effect on the Chinese homosexual community, many do believe that the widespread and global nature of social media has in fact allowed for some misinformation and misrepresentation to be widely considered as the standard for the gay community. One such example is through the famous Chinese BL shows, such as the PRC produced BL drama Revenge Love, in which, although they present lots of homosexual representation, to which this representation is accurate is quite debatable, as in many cases these BL shows are often written not by homosexual men, but by heterosexual women, who more often than not lean more towards fetishizing the homosexual community rather than representing it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, as it is very common for very nuanced and delicate topics like sexual identity to be misused or misunderstood easily without sufficient explanation. And also, while we're on this topic, Yue, I wanted to ask you about your articles, and more specifically, if you found any drawbacks for said studies.
Regrettably, although I am quite proud of these studies, I do agree that there are some flaws in many of these, and they kind of make our findings a little less reliable. The main one is that how we quantify a subjective opinion is going to have inherently some issues. Some people don't really understand the effect of their opinions or thoughts. As well as the fact that the studies have a limited scope and it's probably not holistic enough for us to have this broader understanding of the effects of social media on Chinese homosexual community.
All right, all right. So it really does seem like we're having a discussion going on right now. Well, in that case, I have to ask you guys all to come to a conclusion overall, and that is, which side would you lean towards? Social media helping or not helping the Chinese homosexual community?
Well, overall, I'm still on the side that social media has a net positive effect for the homosexual community. Although now I can see it isn't all sunshine and rainbows, it's just undeniable that the homosexual ideals are becoming much more widespread. And overall, that's just better for people to acclimatize to these new concepts.
I agree. I mean, hypothetically, let's say we were to remove social media from society and then see how reception towards homosexuals in the Chinese community would be. It's much harder to envision the population being as understanding as they currently are, as there would be less methods for promoting dialogue, sharing personal stories, and countering stereotypes.
All right. In that case, Leo, what about you? Has your stance changed?
While I do still think that Chinese homosexuals still experience difficulty, especially with social media creating discourse over their sexual identity, I can now see that the benefits of social media are able to at least outweigh the drawbacks it provides as well.
Well, in that case, I think we all came to a pretty clear consensus. Well, thank you so much, YGS viewers, for paying attention. Come back next week for another exciting episode about gay sex and their stigma. But before we go big, thank you to our amazing guests for their contributions today. We will see you next week. Thank you.